All right. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the Muslim Bitcoiner podcast. Today I have Sooly. Sooly is a humble Twitter pleb, and he's born and raised in Lebanon and is based out in Europe. He currently works as an advisor for Swan Bitcoin to educate and orange pill people in the Middle East. And he's also a moderator for Bitcoin Du Liban, which is the largest Bitcoin educational community in Lebanon. Yeah. So Sooly, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Abdullah. Good to be here.
So I guess just to kind of get started, could you tell us a little bit about how you got started in Bitcoin and what made you orange pilled?
Okay. First off, I need to apologize in advance. My neighbor has a dog, so you might pick that up in the background. Okay. My Bitcoin journey basically started being as a hobby. I started testing the stock markets, traditional markets back in 2016, 2017, started picking up news about Bitcoin 2017. Back then, I had no clue what Bitcoin was and took the decision to, let me look into it. When I looked into it, I discovered that being a Lebanese, the Lebanese central bank had warned, not banned, but warned all Lebanese banks in 2013 from dealing with Bitcoin. So that was the first question, why would the central bank buy something like this? I had no clue what Bitcoin was. Just to pause and give a background, I'm a Lebanese born and raised, moved to Europe. So in 2017, I was in Europe already. Being in Europe, I had a bank account in Europe, but I also had my bank account in Lebanon. And just like a normal person, you try to segregate or separate your bank accounts based on the utility of the bank account. So I had in mind to use my Lebanese bank account for. I was using it already for stock markets, etc. And that was, by the way, I was doing these shitcoin trading on third-party platforms. Okay, not directly through the banks. I will get to the reasons and what I realized a bit after entering Bitcoin. So 2017, I really thought of what back in the day when I really believed Warren Buffett saying that when someone is really scared from something, you need to look into it, etc. I started looking into Bitcoin. I started buying using a third-party trading app. That's 2017. I was doing it very modestly. Let me say, and then in 2018, basically, I had no clue there was crypto. I knew there was Bitcoin. I only read about Bitcoin or in the news at least. So it was like a portfolio of traditional market stocks, shares, metals, whatever you want to call, and then Bitcoin. Over time, I started picking up the noise of crypto, which is about 6 months, 7 months after doing that. And as you trade, as a trader, regardless of what you're trading, that's in parallel with my daily job. You have to have two screens. You need to be notified the whole time on your phone about what's happening. It's an energy drainage, really, especially for someone who has a job already, who's a family man, who's trying to be a good family man. And for me, sleep always been one of the core pillars to have a healthy, balanced life. And I noticed ever since I started trading with Bitcoin, because the markets in Bitcoin are different than the traditional markets. It's 24/7, etc. Everything was out of balance. Discovered the crypto noise, made me shitcoin for a good year. And that was a very interesting part, is that I was lucky not to get wrecked financially, but I did get wrecked when it comes to my life, personal life. That made me realize that, let me pause for a second, let me stop everything I'm doing and take a step back and think about what I'm doing. I noticed that all the crypto was following Bitcoin, regardless if it's going upwards or downwards. I decided to sell all the shitcoins back then without even knowing really any of the rabbit holes, really. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I did that. Fast forward, when I sold, I started reading more about Bitcoin because, again, noticing that everything follows Bitcoin was interesting. for someone curious, and started discovering more about Bitcoin. Started discovering about self-custody. By discovering self-custody, it made me realize that, okay, I haven't been owning my own Bitcoin. So that was really something, because when you trade, back in the day at least, these platforms, you would be buying Bitcoin, seeing Bitcoin on your screen, but it wasn't Bitcoin. You couldn't even, sometimes on some of the platforms, not even withdraw to any wallet. So imagine, like back in the day when you were so proud of having bought at good prices, or even it was like high prices back then, you wouldn't be able to own any. Anyway, that and then 2018, I remember December 2018. So basically, I learned about self-custody mid-year 2018, and then 2018 December, prices went down to about, I don't know, 3,000 something. And made me realize that, okay, on that day, on my way to work, I just I was in the car before going to work. I had prepared myself. I had prepared the account, etc. And I started, I linked it to my European bank account. I just bought on that morning. That morning made me realize that, okay, now I own a Bitcoin, even though it was just on a hot wallet back then. It was non-custodial. So I then transferred it to my cold wallet, blah, 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 blah. Corona, 2 years. For about 2 years, I thought I was on my own in the world, knowing about Bitcoin, like dealing with everything about Bitcoin, anything about related to Bitcoin, since my family, friends, and my circle was in a fiat world. And being a conservative from a investing personality, I never pushed anyone to buy anything, or I never marketed okay, go into this or go into that, etc. I was very private about it, because I was it's just personal. So COVID hit, and when COVID hit, just first couple of weeks, I was already on Clubhouse, and I discovered an Arab community of Bitcoiners, Cafe Bitcoin or Maxis in the West, that were talking 24/7 about Bitcoin. I was home. I wasn't sleeping, but I was really interacting, enjoying discussing Bitcoin. And that made me realize that, okay, I'm not alone. That must be definitely more promising than I thought it was. And life started changing, man, and started building friendships, started opportunities start to open for you. And as over time, fast forward, of course, it was a pleasure to connect with you, man. And
it's kind of interesting, listening to your story, because I had a very different story in that I had my as I mentioned in other previous podcasts, is that my older brother was the one that orange pilled me. So and he was very adamant and very clear about do not shitcoin, just focus only on
lucky,
Bitcoin.
Man.
I was
heard
very,
that.
very lucky, and that I already had kind of at least someone else I knew that was also into Bitcoin. So and then once you start stacking, you kind of start wanting to learn about it, and then that's I started reading the Bitcoin Standard and all these other books and listening to these videos, and then before you know it, you make a Twitter account, and then before you know it, you have a podcast. It's rabbit hole journey is definitely interesting, and I've enjoyed it quite a bit.
Respect, man, to you and your brother, and all the dynamism you've been really showing, because the content back in the day, it was it wasn't like this. It was very rigid. You had some of the dynamic podcasts, etc. And then when it comes to Arabic content, it's in progress. A lot has happened, and maybe we can talk about this later today. But I think with all the other day on BTC Sessions was asking why are we bullish on Bitcoin? Regardless of anything else, today what's happening in the media space, on social media, on podcast, orange pilling is happening passively. Okay. So when usually you orange pill directly, actively to an audience or to a person you're meeting with or you're having coffee with or whatnot. But imagine what's happening in the background. People that will be listening to this podcast or other podcasts months, years after today.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, and yeah, after the social media rabbit hole, Swan Bitcoin got in touch with me asking if I was interested in the Middle East orange pilling. And basically, Cafe Bitcoin obviously now is known to be owned by Swan Bitcoin on Clubhouse as well, and now Twitter is the sessions on Twitter are hosted by Swan Bitcoin as well. And then the approach was very humbling, and then we developed that relationship to a more Middle East and North Africa targeted. So if anyone doesn't know, Swan Bitcoin is just an entity that is Bitcoin only. And why I was interested in Swan Bitcoin in the first place is because of their custody policy. What does that mean? Basically, anyone buying can automatically transfer to their cold wallets their Bitcoin, which is super rare in this world. Anyway, other than they invest in education. And yeah, that's why I chose them. And then over time, my fiat job is between different countries, and I was always wondering about what's happening in the world, in Lebanon, in Southwest Africa, etc. From a banking perspective. My job was like exposing me to the system more and more, from a, let's say, institutional perspective to high net worth individuals, etc. And this is how there was like kind of a marriage between my fiat life and Bitcoin, where I started orange pilling whoever I was getting in touch with. So yeah, and here I am today.
So that's interesting that you've now been working with Swan, and that's kind of like related to what you do in your fiat job. Can you tell us more about how your about your role at Swan, trying to orange pill the Middle East? Like, what kind of do you like? Have you been like translating content into Arabic, or what kind of stuff have you guys been doing?
Okay, so there are two pillars. The main pillar is basically Swan is adapted to the West, to the Western world when it comes to their strategy. Their strategy is to get 10 million Bitcoiners on board of Bitcoin. Being like the Middle East is completely different. The high net worth individuals have a different, let's say, not only approach, but thinking about investment, trading, etc. In the West, women, for example, are more open for, let's say, advertisements, etc. So the whole adaptation or even introduction to the Middle East and the African way of how the high net worth individuals, because in Swan Bitcoin, you have Swan Bitcoin and you have Swan Private, and my work is with Swan Private, which is targeted to family offices and high net worth individuals. So first pillar is a marketing, educational adaptation to the region. Second pillar is getting more Bitcoiners on board, and that's how to actively do that. Doing it, Swan Bitcoin has a kind of a concierge service, which is like when you have like over-the-counter advisors that are dedicated to high net worth individuals, educating them on Bitcoin, etc., buying Bitcoin over specific communication channels, etc., without like really going through the traditional way. So. Plus other services, obviously, but yeah, this is in a nutshell what Swan does, and yeah, it's been a great learning experience. Now, in parallel with Swan, and I've been continuing my orange pilling on a personal level, because like Swan, as any other company, has different compliance, etc. So my orange pilling doesn't stop with Swan. I'm only an advisor for Swan, but I also advise other high net worth individuals, family offices in other areas. So yeah,
that's pretty awesome. Can you also tell us about like the orange pilling process, like especially like for folks that are like high net worth individuals? Are they kind of open to the idea of Bitcoin when you tell them, or have you gotten some where they're just like, oh, this guy is a degenerate gambler, he doesn't know what he's talking about?
I mean, humans are humans, right? The best practice in Bitcoin orange pilling is Saifuddin's as well, which is like starting with the monetary issues in the world, right? Mm-hmm. You need to understand money, you need to understand the history of money, the problems with money, and then you pitch the solutions. Mm-hmm. And that solution would be, the perfect solution would be something called Bitcoin. And it exists. It's been functioning for 13 years, blah, blah, blah. So high net worth individuals, most of them already know the problems with money, right? They've been fortunes and they've been impacted by inflation for decades. So they know what inflation means. They know what the central banks have been doing. My own, let's say, pitch, and it's been working pretty well, is just like personalizing the scenario. High net worth individuals come from different industry. If someone has a, let's say, metal factory or factories, you can approach that through different angles. For example, this high net worth individual I'm talking about buys metal with every dip. He dollar cost average with metal because he uses metal for his own plant, for example. That's one angle. So you build like these analogies with Bitcoin because like if you believe in an asset, you're benefiting from an investment perspective, you can build these analogies as well. Now, factories produce heat, and then you can discuss energy, and then you can discuss mining and these angles as well. You might encounter high net worth individuals that have been, let's say, captured by the noise of crypto before you meet them. So you hear that they are a believer of a huge shitcoin or the mother of all shitcoins. And then that's a different approach. So yeah, I mean, there are different ways. Different people have different orange pilling techniques, I believe. But one thing is, like, when I first started orange pilling and like going on Clubhouse and like you have this high levels of toxicity and you have these high levels of like, I don't know what you want to call it, but you're hyperactive in a way where you need to get your point there. And over time, the more you do it, the more I realized that it's okay if you don't pitch for Bitcoin directly. Start with the monetary issues. Start looking for, the bank's limitations. Like every human, specifically the business owners, encounter banking transaction issues. Whatever the situation is when it comes to like savings account or an investing account or like letters of credits or whatever their financial situation would be, they have issues daily with the banks. And then you start talking about the Bitcoin layer 1, layer 2, and what's happening on Bitcoin. Like the thing is, Bitcoin is so easy to defend. So it's not like you don't have to be really, people think that, I listen to that expert. Listen, there are no experts in the space. Okay. There's something called Bitcoin. It's super strong, super secure, hasn't been defended for 13 years. So it's so easy to orange pill. Just learn about it and start doing it. And you will become better and better at it like anything else over time and have a low time preference.
Yeah, I also find that, as I'm trying to like orange pills, specifically Muslims within my local community, I find that it helps to talk about the problems first, like the monetary issues. And yeah, exactly. Like, if they're like a business, for example, that has to like take payments or donations, there's different angles that you can approach from that orange pilling perspective. But yeah, I find that like talking about the problem first and then maybe presenting, like, it doesn't even have to be in the same orange pilling session. It could be at a future date where, like, you might be wearing a Bitcoin shirt or something, and they're like, oh, or you're into Bitcoin. It's like, yeah, actually, let's continue that discussion we had before. So on that issue, I kind of wanted to pivot a little bit to talk about the situation in Lebanon. I was curious to read the pinned thread that you have on your Twitter profile talking about the inflation that's going on in Lebanon. Could you talk about that and like the different factors that have contributed to the problem of inflation in Lebanon, in your opinion?
Okay. And like to be really brief about the history, it's just like Lebanon has ever since it existed, it always had a complex dynamics. So to understand Lebanon, you need to understand the demographics, where it's placed geographically, etc. So basically, Lebanon has been most famous about its 60s to early 70s period, where it was the golden age of Lebanon. So that's when Lebanon was known to be like Switzerland of the Middle East. Beirut was Paris of the Middle East, etc. And this is how it started, like being in like movies, and people know about Lebanon, despite its very small size. Now, from a geographical perspective, Lebanon is situated on the east of the Mediterranean. Okay, we have the sea from the west, we have Syria from the north and the east, and we have occupied Palestine in the south. Okay, so you can tell from the geographical locations, we're not in the best spot in the world. From a climate perspective, great. From a foods perspective, amazing. But when it comes to geopolitics, not the best, even one of the worst in the world. We have 4 million Lebanese population. We have about 400,000 refugees, Palestinian refugees specifically. We have today more than 1 million Syrian refugees. So you have a total population of about 6 million, about 2 million internationals or like immigrants or like non-Lebanese locals in a country that recovered or the civil war in Lebanon ended in 1990. So you have the period from the golden age in the 60s, 70s to the 1990. So we have the golden age from the 60s to the early 70s. Then the civil war started in 1975 and only ended in 1990. Okay, so you have 3 periods: the golden age, the civil war, and the post-civil war, which is continuing until today, 2022. And to understand what's happening today, you need to look at the history, like Bitcoin and anything else. Today, at the golden age, early 70s, $1 was equivalent to about 2 Lebanese liras. Okay. Today, $1 is equivalent to 30,000 Lebanese liras.
Wow.
So now today you hear in the mainstream media and even on Bitcoin Twitter and on most of the Lebanese, unfortunately, media, they talk about inflation in 2022 from 1990 to 2022. And in 1990, so that's an interesting part, that inflation didn't start these 2 years like most of the people think. Okay, the inflation in Lebanon, the economic crisis started 2 years ago. So unfortunately, most Lebanese mainstream media talk about the economic issues these 2 years. These 2 years in specific, because in 2019, October 2019, there's this Lebanese revolution that started. That started because the Lebanese population, everyone, me included, discovered that the Central Bank of Lebanon had made the biggest historical Ponzi scheme on the largest level, affecting all the population. So today, if you're Lebanese, you can't access your bank account in Lebanon. If you have saved all your life in dollars, you can't withdraw any of the dollars, etc. So having lived through that for 2 years, seeing the currency devaluing from 1,500 to 30,000 it's really something. So that's the period today of Lebanon. The period that started from 1990 to 2019 is when all this period you had a fixed exchange rate from dollars to Lebanese pounds, which means back then in 1990, the Central Bank of Lebanon had the green light from the Fed to basically make sure every dollar would always be equivalent to 1,500 Lebanese pounds. When that happened, everyone was super happy. You started getting foreign investment from all over the world. Back in the day, that Ponzi was under the banking secrecy. So if you had a bank account in Lebanon, it's just like having a bank account in Switzerland. No one could even, like, your information in your account wouldn't be disclosed in the media. in any circumstances. And today they talk about Bitcoin money laundering, right? And I mean, banking secrecy. Thank God today there is no banking secrecy, not even Lebanon or Switzerland. But like imagine like central banks, and as we know, in this fiat world, any central bank in any government, any country in the world can't do anything without the Fed's permission if they had dollars, right? So again, people talk about the inflation in Lebanon and how the economic situation is really catastrophic in Lebanon just these 2 years, whereas these problems started in 1990. Now let's not all blame it on the fiat central bank, but also we need to blame it on ourselves. To be responsible, there's a really high level of corruption in Lebanon. So that never helped anything, because you can have centralized systems that work, but for a centralized system to work, you can't have corruption. Like if Bitcoin was owned by anyone would be tempted to be corrupted and the system wouldn't work, right? So you had a mix of catastrophic ingredients, and corruption was and still is a huge part of it. Now, if you want to link the dots, and the deeper you go in the Bitcoin rabbit holes, you start understanding situations in the world. So when you hear about Lebanon, Venezuela, Argentina, you start to wonder, okay, what's there? When did they go off the gold standard? What does the gold standard mean, etc. So Lebanon was thriving before the gold standard. So even I haven't heard anyone talking about it, just that back in the day when you had some prosperity and like let's say a country flourishing, depending on your geopolitical situation in the world, that had different meanings. Lebanon today and historically had only one economic sector that was productive, which is the service sector, banking and tourism. So no industry, no agriculture, no export, very minimal, but nothing that could positively be impacting the country. All this period since 1975, since the Civil War until 1990, nothing has happened. Obviously, from 1990 until today, nothing has happened still yet. For me, one of the positives about what's happening in Lebanon and everywhere in the world where such economic issues are happening, the positive thing is that people learn with pain, unfortunately. Any human would learn by either being curious or by a need or being in pain or hurt to learn about anything. It's an ugly truth, but we need to accept it. Today, the Lebanese and everyone in the world is learning about money. And I think money awareness and what is money, what is inflation, is at its best when it comes from an educational awareness perspective. Okay, we still need to raise awareness for billions of people, but what's been happening in 2022 is much better than what happened in the 70s, when also no one had access to information at this speed.
Right.
So this is really why I'm positive that things will get better, because there is better awareness about everything. Specifically about the fiat world and the central banks.
Yeah, that's actually what I was going to ask you next. Is that so obviously, like, the people that are in Lebanon are facing this pain of like inflation and hyperinflation, and when you're trying to, I don't know if you've been in contact with like people that are suffering from inflation in Lebanon, but do you find that it's easier to orange pill people that are suffering from hyperinflation? Because to me, it would just seem like, okay, like your money's devaluing at such an incredible rate. Like, here's this thing that's called Bitcoin. Like, I imagine it would be a lot easier to orange pill someone in that situation compared to like someone like me in the first world.
That's a very interesting question. And there's a lot of truth in it. So back to orange pilling techniques, depends on who is that person, where are they in the world, because Bitcoin can be understood in different ways. If you're in the developed world or if you're in the third world, if we can say. In Lebanon, basically I was in Lebanon for a month. I came back a week ago. Yes, I've been talking with all my friends, waiters at restaurants, delivery people at the door. Like, when you're like back in your home country, you can have this conversation more easily, etc. Lebanese are super friendly. That's one of the beauty in Lebanon. Now, starting with my closest circle, like even my mom a year ago, she started attending these clubhouse sessions I was having. She was just listening. And I was like, okay, what do you think, Mom, of Bitcoin? And she was like, it definitely has potential. I was like, okay, but let me ask you one question. Today, you had money, you had saved all your life savings are gone, right? She was like, yeah. And then I asked her like, do you think there is hope in getting your money back? She was like, no, I don't think so. And then I asked her like, okay, you spent a few hours listening about Bitcoin, a couple of sessions, you know what Bitcoin is. What do you think of Bitcoin? Do you think it has some hope? She was like, yeah, definitely it has hope. I was like, okay, so you have a hopeless system and you have a system that is built on not trust, but on a formula that works. So Lebanese now know that they can't trust the banks. The Lebanese now know that the Lebanese banking system specifically can't be trusted. They're all looking for real estate. They're all been looking to secure some of their money in something. Today, if you're a Lebanese and you have $100 at the bank, there's a way to get your money back. But by doing so, you go to the bank, you ask to withdraw all your money or the amount you want, let's say $100, and you will get only 18% of your actual money.
Wow.
So imagine if you had $100 at the bank, you will get $18 in dollar terms.
Is that just being lost from like fees and things like
No,
that?
lost due to the devaluation.
Wow.
So basically, because of the devaluation, and this, by the way, doesn't only happen in Lebanon or Argentina or Venezuela. I witnessed this in Angola in Southwest Africa. So basically, when inflation hits, the central bank stops the private banks from of transferring money outside the country. That's the first thing they do. Why do they do that? They do that to preserve the foreign currencies they have in country. Because as you know, when you see a number on your screen, that doesn't mean it exists in the bank. So basically, so fractional reserve banking is part of the reason. So when inflation hits, the central bank tries to put control on the banks not to transfer money outside. In countries like Angola, where it's an oil-based economy, it's fine as long as you have a productive economy. You have some income getting to the government, to the central bank. In Lebanon, there is none.
Wow.
Okay, not only none, you have a population that is relying on imports. You have 2 million refugees relying on aid, 2 million refugees competing on labor with the local population. So for these reasons, you get $18 for your $100 savings today in Lebanon. But you know what? Some people got convinced and start emptying their bank account this way, getting these $18 for every $100 and investing in Bitcoin.
Wow.
Just because they started understanding, okay, it's a long-term thing. If I had money, I would buy an apartment and to maybe sell it in 10, 20 years. But if I can sleep on Bitcoin for 10, 20 years, and even if I don't have the price of a property, of a real estate property, I can already start building back my savings. I did that. I was lucky to have done that before the crisis. And I know that many like me did better job than I did, but also many have recovered their savings this way. I made profit on it. Obviously, the earlier they knew about Bitcoin, discovered Bitcoin, got curious about Bitcoin. So in Lebanon today, they know about Bitcoin let's say they understand Bitcoin in a much easier way. The problem today that is facing Lebanese orange pilling in Lebanon is that the Lebanese need to survive daily. So there is no electricity, there is no water getting to your house. And to do that, you need to pay for it extra, not from the government. You need to get a supply for water on a weekly basis to get water delivered, even if you're in the capital, even if you have a business, if you have a shop, a store, a business, if you live under any roof, you need the bulbs to go on at night. You need heating, so you need diesel. To get diesel, you need to pay for it also through different suppliers. So you have to spend while all your savings are not accessible. So people that are understanding Bitcoin today, most of them are saying that, okay, I understand what Bitcoin is. I see the hope in Bitcoin, but I need to survive. If I have $100 today to live on, I can't put any in Bitcoin, and which is completely understandable.
Right.
But these same people are starting to stack sats. Slowly but surely, they understand Bitcoin better. And even the friends I spoke about Bitcoin like a year ago, they weren't convinced. Today, they're calling me, telling me, go buy today. It's you need to buy Bitcoin today. It's at a good price, etc., which is a good process. Today, we have shops in Lebanon accepting Bitcoin. Now, today, the stable coins, unfortunately, are more attractive for Lebanese because they can use it in a circular economy without like the volatility happening.
I see.
So that's where the Lebanese stand today. Now, on an education level, during the Corona period, being at home, I discovered the Lebanese community, and thanks for introducing it in the intro. Bitcoin du Liban is a community founded by Marco. I really hope that you'll connect with Marco, a really cool guy. I learned a lot from him. And I think the Lebanese in general should be one day grateful for Marco's effort. So basically, Bitcoin du Liban is just a group of people that are raising awareness about Bitcoin. We have the biggest Telegram channel for Lebanese education. I mean, scammers are always coming and being banned, but anyway, it's still worth talking about it. Marco launched a website a couple of months ago for Bitcoin du Liban, like a newer one, a better one, etc. So we're also calling for contributors. If you want to write content in English or Arabic, please. No problem. That's and even for you, I think there are lots of Muslims in Lebanon that would be grateful to get your content there. So we'd love to put it there. Talking about Arabic content, Arabic Huddle, another shout out for him, has the oldest, purest Arabic website on Bitcoin called bitcoinarabic.org. So we've been using, I think most of the Arabic Bitcoin maxis refer to bitcoinarabic.org because it has all the gems translated into Arabic.
Okay.
Now we're putting more effort today to start, let's say, facilitating the language, because you have in Arabic, as you know, you have the written Arabic, which is Al-Fusha, and Al-Fusha is much more rough and difficult to understand.
It's like classical Arabic, right?
Yes, super classical literature language. And you have the spoken Arabic, which none of the Bitcoin content is written in. So today we're trying to transform this content into a more spoken language through podcasts, and there are a couple of channels that are really working on this. There's like Bitcoin 21, which is like a group of maxis from all the Arab world, and I'm sure I'm going to put you in touch with them later on. From Saudi to Syria to Jordan to Lebanon to like a lot is happening in the back. Again, why are we talking about this? Because Bitcoin doesn't have a marketing department. Bitcoin doesn't have a CEO. All other projects, shitcoins, you call it crypto, they have an owner, they have like a marketing department doing all this work. The plebs, the Bitcoiners start like just this amazing podcast and others, like educating people, helping to raise awareness, helping not to market Bitcoin for its price, trying to raise awareness about the messed up system we're living in.
Yeah. I think I think that's really cool that you mentioned about Bitcoin not having a marketing department. It's because when you start learning about Bitcoin, you can't help but to like tell other people about it. And I think that's really cool that there's already like kind of like a network of like Bitcoin, like not just people that are interested in Bitcoin, but like Bitcoin maximalists that kind of get like the actual innovation of Bitcoin, and they're kind of already like connecting together and trying to spread that message, because that's the problem that I see. I mean, from just from looking in the general Islamic world, whenever I search for things that are talking about Bitcoin, it always gets lost in the crypto DeFi sauce, and it doesn't it doesn't come from like a Bitcoin only perspective. So they completely like miss the true innovation of what Bitcoin is. And I think it's cool that there's efforts that are being done in the Middle East to try to orange pill Middle Easterners. So like kind of on that topic, not just in Lebanon, but do you see governments in the Middle East are still? I know historically they've been pretty hostile toward Bitcoin, and some governments have quote unquote banned it. Do you see governments in the Middle East are starting to open up to Bitcoin, or are they still like very anti-Bitcoin? Well, what's your take on that?
Thomas, which is another Maxi, has his podcast, asked me the same question. Podcast called Al-Ala Podcast. It's in Arabic and a mix of a bit of English.
Mm-hmm.
Today, you have two main reasons for Muslims in general and Middle Easterns in specific not to adopt Bitcoin or be open about Bitcoin on mainstream media. First off, you have religion. Mm-hmm. Second reason is politics. When we talk about religion, today, the Middle East is becoming more and more open when it comes to open to foreign investments, when it comes to open to foreign media. That's good. Already, if you see Dubai and United Arab Emirates being like, if you're on the road there, you see billboards of shitcoins all over on highways from the airport to the biggest malls. And that's Dubai, man. I was like, wanted to attend. That was my first event. Was attending like the biggest tech event in the Middle East. And there was like a blockchain event. And I went there in Dubai and I saw shitcoinery happening live. And that was like, okay, that was super disappointing. That the toxicity levels were like really overboard. But when I really took a step back, I breathed about it, and I realized that's still good for Bitcoin eventually. So let's take Dubai as an example. Today, you can buy properties in Dubai officially in Bitcoin, which is great. Today, they call it crypto district, whereby you can have a Bitcoin-based company, for example, registered in 24 hours, etc. So they have these all financial facilities, which is also great. So from a economic, religious side, economically, it's getting more and more open. Yes, it's much better than before. Yes. When it comes to religion, and if Bitcoin is halal, we'll talk about that in a bit, but it's still a gray area. Before it was like, no, Bitcoin is haram. Today we're not talking about it, which is maybe better. And definitely over time, we'll start talking about it positively because we all know why. I mean, it's only halal money in the world.
Yeah, exactly.
But when it comes to the politics and geopolitics in specific, that's the tricky part. The petrodollar is the tricky part. I don't see it accelerating due to the political aspect, just because today Bitcoin can be used by OPEC, just because it doesn't have the liquidity enough. The volatility doesn't make it possible. Yeah, it's a long way, but it's happening. So yeah, that's my point about the Middle East.
Okay. Just to kind of circle back about orange pilling people in Lebanon and getting them to get on a Bitcoin standard. How how hard is it for Lebanese people to buy Bitcoin? Like, I mean, obviously, I imagine their bank is not going to let them buy Bitcoin. Like, what's the standard procedure or protocol for someone in Lebanon to buy Bitcoin?
The best way to buy Bitcoin in the world, in my point of view, and I'm talking about from someone who's been traveling a lot. Mm-hmm. Today, you can get it. You can call for a delivery, so you can call a number. Someone can come and meet you wherever you want. Would transfer you Bitcoin before you pay in cash. So that's the etiquette. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So the Lebanese, that's the thing. So we spoke about Lebanon having only one strong sector. It's a service sector, right? For decades. So yeah, you have pretty reliable agents, let's call them.
Cool. Okay. That's really
They've been operating officially. Okay, because today, there is no taxes on Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. There are no legislations about Bitcoin. It's a gray area. So it's super easy to get Bitcoin in Lebanon. Super easy. Now, Marco, the same founder for Bitcoin du Liban, has a marketplace on Telegram with thousands of people. And you just need to respect the format and everyone. Basically, what this channel is about. So if Sooly wants to buy or sell Bitcoin, I just write, want to sell Bitcoin in this location and DM me. So you would DM me with your number and you put, it's like a locals Bitcoin, but on Telegram. But it's very peer-to-peer.
Right.
Okay. So peer-to-peer is the way. And mining, like people are mining easily in Lebanon if they had access to cheap electricity. But yeah, the miners, like maintenance of the miners is tough, especially with the electricity cuts and when you need to switch from generator to solar, etc. So it's pretty easy to own Bitcoin today in Lebanon or to buy Bitcoin.
Wow, that's really great to hear. I mean, I agree. I think like peer-to-peer is just the best way to exchange Bitcoin, and that's really great that there's already like a network there, so that way you don't have to like ask permission from like a bank or something. That's really awesome.
The core white paper ethos of Bitcoin.
Yes, that's really great to hear. I guess but before we close out in a bit, I want to get your opinion about like what do you think is the biggest obstacle for Arabs/Muslims in the Middle East to adopt the Bitcoin standard? And this has different answers, but I just kind of want to get to see what your opinion is about what the biggest obstacle is for getting the entire like Middle East to be orange pilled.
Wow. Okay. The biggest obstacle would be what is the country that person is in? If we're talking about the Middle East in general, the closer you get to Lebanon, the more difficult it becomes. From a location perspective, like really objectively speaking, these are, if you take the facts, history, I think first time I'm saying it publicly, maybe Lebanon would be one of the last places on earth to change to a Bitcoin standard. Unfortunately, it's super tough, man. Realistically speaking, I'm talking from a government level. Now, when it comes to businesses, I know businesses that converted to Bitcoin standards today in the Middle East. Okay. So yeah, that can happen. The biggest obstacle is the location. The more stable the economy, obviously the better, but it's even though Bitcoin is apolitical, when you understand Bitcoin, it becomes political. Like, that's how amazing it is. And this is how frustrating it is for me, is that we're talking about something that is apolitical, but to use it on a big scale, on a Bitcoin standard, it's going to be political. And today, Middle East, I think the UAE could be one of the earliest. We heard that Oman also is more open. There are talks with other governments offline. And I think that it's going to start slowly. But the biggest obstacle today is a political obstacle.
That's actually a really good answer. I find, from just looking on stuff on Twitter. I'm not talking about like actually like going outside and seeing what's going on, but just like from like looking on Twitter and other social media, it does seem like, you know, the biggest obstacle to me is just like the education part. I mean, so you have like when talking about Muslims specifically, you have Muslims that are like they understand quote unquote Bitcoin, but like they're still lost in like talking about blockchain and DeFi. So it's like, okay, like you might understand Bitcoin at a technical level, but like you don't really get Bitcoin because you're still like obsessed with thinking that blockchain is like a revolutionary thing. And then I guess also, you know, from another perspective on that education front is that, you know, you have Muslims that just dismiss Bitcoin entirely without even like looking at it because they've just like heard something on like something some scholar said or something that they heard in some media outlet about Bitcoin being for criminals or something. So yeah, and that's a really good point that you brought up about the political aspect of it. Definitely, like yes, Bitcoin is apolitical, but like when you involve humans with it, it becomes political, just like everything else. So that's a really good answer. I guess that's pretty much all I had. I do want to like ask a last question to you about like. Do you have any like parting thoughts that you have, or just any general advice for maybe any Muslim or Arab that's listening onto the podcast and that are interested in getting to learn about Bitcoin? Like what advice do you have for them?
First thing, you go on Twitter and you follow Muslim Bitcoiner. First thing, seriously, I do that myself, by the way. So you connect with Muslim Bitcoiner. That's step one. Seriously, his DMs are open. The guy is a cool guy. If you're into reading books, start with the Bitcoin Standard. That's before you read the Fiat Standard, ultimately, by Saifuddin Ammous. And there's a section in the Fiat Standard talking about riba, and you will start understanding what is happening there. That's if you like books. And then basically Bitcoin, you start somewhere and you're going to continue on your own. Don't worry. You don't need to be an expert. You don't need to be a scholar to understand what's happening. And when it comes to videos, I think Saifuddin has pretty good videos about the topic. Unfortunately, there isn't like, if you go check his podcast, Saifuddin's podcast, you have a few good episodes there. And take it from there. That's I don't want to make it complicated because it's super simple. And these are the two pure signals for me: Muslim Bitcoiner and Saifuddin. For now, of course, you have many. And we spoke about BitcoinArabic.org. It has some Arabic content about the topic as well. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for coming on the show. And I guess if you want to reach out to Sooly, his Twitter handle is at Sooly_Kobayashi. And if you want to get in touch with their organization, you can go to search for Bitcoin Lebanon, and you can get in touch with other Middle Eastern Bitcoiners there as well. So Sooly, thank you for being on the show.
Thanks, man. Salam.